The DNA results destroyed their peace, the betrayal shattered their trust, and the kidnapping broke every rule. But nothing prepared Sol for what an alpha does when you steal his pregnant mate. Kong Min-ju thought he understood danger. He'd spent 15 years navigating Seoul's underworld, where betrayal was currency and violence was language. He'd built an empire on calculated risks and cold precision, survived assassination attempts, government raids, and rival factions' ambitions. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the terror of having something precious to lose. 6 months after claiming Lee Min-suk as his mate and adopting Jaehoon as his son, Min-ju had learned what true vulnerability felt like. Every morning he woke to Min-suk's warmth beside him and Jaehoon's babbling from the nursery. He felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. Love, he discovered, was the most dangerous thing he'd ever possessed. His enemies had learned that too. The test results came back, Kim Jae-sung said, sliding the envelope across Min-ju's desk with an expression that promised nothing good. You're not going to like this. Min-ju opened it with steady hands, years of control keeping his face neutral even as his world tilted. DNA analysis. Probability of paternity, 0%. Choi Tae-hyun was not Jaehoon's biological father. Impossible, Min-ju said flatly. Min-suk wouldn't lie about. There's more. Kim's voice held something Min-ju couldn't identify. Something that should have been his first warning. Choi's lawyers are filing for custody anyway. Claiming the false paternity constitutes fraud, and as an alpha, he has rights to. Rights to nothing. Min-ju's eyes flashed gold. Jaehoon is legally mine. The adoption is final. They're challenging it. And sir, Kim hesitated. The government task force is requesting your presence for questioning. About your organization's activities. They have very detailed information. Min-ju felt it then, the first cold touch of coordinated attack. Multiple fronts, perfect timing, inside information. Someone close had betrayed them. And Seoul was about to learn what happened when you declared war on a bonded alpha's family. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and tell me where you're watching from. Min-ju walked into their penthouse suite carrying the DNA results like a live grenade, finding Min-suk curled on the couch with Jaehoon asleep against his chest. The picture of domestic peace, his Omega reading while their son napped, afternoon sunlight painting them golden. 6 months ago, this scene would have been impossible. Now it was everything. He was about to destroy it. Min-suk, he said quietly. We need to talk. His mate looked up, and the bond immediately flooded with Min-ju's carefully controlled rage. Min-suk's eyes widened. What happened? Choi Tae-hyun had DNA testing done on Jaehoon. Min-ju set the envelope on the coffee table. The results say he's not the biological father. The color drained from Min-suk's face. That's impossible. He was the only alpha I was ever with before you, and the timeline. I know. Min-ju crouched in front of him, taking his free hand. I'm not questioning you. But Choi is using this to file for custody anyway. His lawyers are claiming you committed fraud, that the false paternity proves you're an unfit parent. But you adopted him. The courts can't. They're challenging the adoption on grounds that it was based on fraudulent claims about Jaehoon's parentage. Min-ju's jaw clenched. It's bullshit legal maneuvering, but it's real. We're going to have to fight this. Min-suk's scent turned acrid with fear, and Jaehoon stirred, whimpering at the distress. Min-suk immediately shifted to soothing their son, but his hands trembled. How is this possible? I was only with Choi. Unless the DNA test is wrong. Or fabricated. Min-ju stood, already pulling out his phone. I'm having our own independent testing done. But even if we prove the results are falsified, Choi's already filed the paperwork. The legal process has started. He's doing this to hurt me. Min-suk's voice went hollow. To punish me for escaping. For finding someone who actually wanted us. He's doing this because he's a vindictive bastard who sees you as property he lost. Min-ju's alpha voice bled through, making the windows rattle slightly. And he's about to learn what happens when you try to take what's mine. The bond pulsed with Min-ju's protective fury, and Min-suk felt something shift in his own body. A warmth that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with biology. His suppressants, he'd been taking proper prescription ones since bonding, should have prevented this for another 2 weeks. Min-ju, he whispered, recognizing the signs. I think my heat is starting early. Min-ju's nostrils flared as he caught the first notes of preheat in Min-suk's scent. Sweet and desperate, and uniquely his. Stress can trigger it. The bond responds to emotional distress by trying to reinforce the connection. Min-suk finished, his medical training cutting through the rising heat haze. Our bodies think we're under threat and want to strengthen the bond. Are you okay with this? Min-ju forced himself to step back, giving space. I can suppress my rut. We can ride this out separately if you need. No. Min-suk stood carefully, settling Jehun into his crib nearby. I need you. I need to feel the bond, to remember we're stronger together than anything they can throw at us. The heat hit fully over the next hour, and Min-ju's rut rose to meet it with the inevitability of tide following moon. They barely made it to their bedroom before biology took over. 6 months of bonded compatibility, making everything more intense than their first frantic coupling. This time, there was no fear. Just desperate need and the bone-deep certainty of belonging. Min-ju took his mate with a tenderness that belied his alpha instincts, and Min-suk met him with equal hunger, the bond singing between them with every touch. Mine. Min-ju growled against Min-suk's claiming mark, feeling it pulse under his lips. Always mine. Yours, Min-suk gasped, nails raking down his alpha's back. Only yours. The heat lasted 3 days, shorter than in bonded heats but more intense. They surfaced occasionally for water and to check on Jehun, who was being cared for by trusted staff, before diving back into each other. By the 3rd day, when Min-suk's heat finally broke, they lay tangled together in sweat-soaked sheets, the bond humming with satisfaction. I love you, Min-suk said softly, the first time either of them had spoken the words aloud. I know we started as a transaction, but I love you too. Min-ju pulled him closer, breathing in his mate's scent beneath the heat pheromones. Have for months. Was just too much of a coward to say it. Min-suk laughed, the sound exhausted and happy. Then his expression shifted, something occurring to him. Min-ju, we didn't use any birth control. You're on suppressants. Min-ju started, then stopped. Because suppressants only worked when taken consistently, and the stress-triggered heat had come 2 weeks early, before the next injection was due. I need to take a test, Min-suk said quietly. 2 hours later, they stared at the positive pregnancy test in Min-suk's shaking hands. Pregnant, Min-suk whispered. I'm pregnant. Min-ju should have been terrified. The timing was catastrophic, legal battles looming, custody challenges, enemies circling. A pregnant Omega was vulnerable, would need constant protection, would be an even bigger target for anyone wanting to hurt them. Instead, he felt overwhelming joy crash through the bond. We're having a baby. Are you happy? Min-suk looked up with cautious hope. I know the timing is terrible, with everything happening. I'm fucking ecstatic. Min-ju pulled him into a fierce embrace. You, Jehun, and now this. You've given me everything I never knew I needed. Min-suk buried his face in his alpha's chest, feeling the bond settle into contentment. What are we going to do about Choi? About the custody battle? We're going to destroy his case. Min-ju's voice hardened with determination. Get our own DNA testing, prove he falsified the results, and bury him so deep in legal consequences he'll never surface. And if the test shows Jehun really isn't his, then we find out who his biological father actually is and deal with it. Min-ju tilted Min-suk's face up, meeting his eyes directly. But nothing, absolutely nothing, changes the fact that Jehun is our son. Biology doesn't make a father. Choice does. And I chose him the moment he crawled into my office. Min-suk kissed him softly. We're going to get through this. Yes, Min-ju agreed. We are. But even as he held his pregnant mate and promised protection, Min-ju felt the first whisper of unease. The DNA results, the perfectly timed legal challenge, the government investigation Kim had mentioned. It was all too coordinated. Too precise. Someone with inside knowledge was orchestrating this attack. And Min-ju was about to find out that the greatest threats don't always come from known enemies. Sometimes they come from the people you trust most. The government raid happened at dawn, 3 days after the DNA results went public. Min-ju stood in his corporate headquarters watching federal agents swarm through offices with the kind of precision that spoke of detailed floor plans and insider knowledge. They knew exactly which servers to seize, which files to confiscate, which employees to question. No wasted movement. No random searches. They have warrants for everything, his lawyer said, appearing at his elbow with barely concealed panic. Financial records, communications, property deeds. Someone gave them a roadmap. Obviously, Min-ju tracked an agent heading straight for a hidden safe that wasn't on any official building plans. The question is who? His phone buzzed. Min-suk's name flashed on the screen, and Min-ju felt his alpha instincts spike with immediate concern. His mate knew better than to call during a crisis unless something was wrong. What happened? He answered, keeping his voice level. My parents are here. Min Suk's voice trembled with a complicated mix of emotions the bond let Min Ju feel: shock, old hurt, desperate hope warring with suspicion. At the penthouse, security let them up because they said they want to help with the custody battle. Every alarm in Min Ju's head started screaming. Don't let them near Jehun. I'm on my way. Min Ju, they're my parents. I haven't seen them in 5 years, but... Which is exactly why their timing is suspicious. He was already moving toward the elevator, his security detail falling in around him. Government raids my businesses the same week your estranged family suddenly wants to reconcile? That's not coincidence. The silence on the other end told him Min Suk was thinking the same thing, but didn't want to believe it. Just be careful, Min Ju said, gentler now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't agree to anything until I arrive. He made it in 15, breaking every traffic law Seoul had. His penthouse was supposed to be a fortress, yet here were Lee Sang-wook and Park Mi-young, Min Suk's parents, sitting in his living room like they belonged there. Expensive clothes, practiced smiles, and the kind of predatory politeness that came from decades of high society manipulation. Min Suk stood by the window with Jehun on his hip, his body language defensive. The bond hummed with his distress, and Min Ju had to force himself not to immediately grab them both and remove them from the room. Kong SSI, Lee Sang-wook stood, extending a hand Min Ju didn't take. Thank you for allowing us this audience. We know our appearance must be unexpected. Convenient timing, Min Ju said flatly. My son's paternity is publicly questioned, I'm under federal investigation, and suddenly you remember you have a son you disowned 5 years ago. Park Mi-young's smile never wavered. We made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But family is family, and when we heard about the custody battle, we realized we can help. Help how? Min Ju moved to stand beside Min Suk, a clear claiming gesture that made Jehun reach for him with happy babbles of Appa. We have resources, Lee Sang-wook said smoothly. Legal connections, political influence. The kind of support that could make this custody challenge disappear. All we ask is that we be allowed back into Min Suk's life. To meet our grandson properly. I have legal representation, Min Ju countered. And political connections of my own. Yes, but do your connections include Justice Kim Tae-won? Park Mi-young's eyes glittered. Who happens to be presiding over the custody hearing. Because he's been a family friend for 30 years. The threat was barely veiled. They had the judge, which meant they'd been planning this longer than the DNA results suggested. Min Suk's hand found Min Ju's, trembling. You knew. About the hearing. About Judge Kim. How? We have our sources. Lee Sang-wook's smile turned colder. Just like we know about your condition. Congratulations on the pregnancy, by the way. Though carrying a mafia boss's child while fighting a custody battle is rather complicated, isn't it? Min Ju felt his canines lengthen, his alpha biology reacting to the subtle threat against his mate and unborn child. You need to leave. Now. We're trying to help, Park Mi-young insisted, but her eyes were calculating. Min Suk, sweetheart, you know how dangerous Kang Asai's world is. What kind of life can you give children when their father is under federal investigation? When rival gangs might target them at any moment? A better life than you gave me, Min Suk said, voice shaking but firm. You abandoned me when I needed you most. I don't need you now. Don't be naive. Lee Sang-wook's pleasant facade cracked slightly. The courts won't look favorably on an Omega raising children in a criminal's household. Even with the bond, they can rule you're being coerced, that the environment is unsafe. You could lose both children. The words hit like physical blows. Min Ju felt Min Suk's fear spike through their bond. The terrible possibility that courts might separate them from Jehun and take their unborn child into protective custody. Unless, Park Mi-young added softly, you have family support. Respectable, wealthy family who can testify to providing a stable alternative if needed. Who can influence judges and social workers. Who can make all of this go away. At what price? Min Ju demanded. Just reconnection. Family dinners. Time with our grandson and future grandchild. Is that so unreasonable? Lee Sang-wook spread his hands. We made mistakes, but we're trying to make amends. And practically speaking, you need us. After they left, escorted out by security with promises to think about the offer. Min Ju stood at his window watching Seoul's skyline and feeling the walls closing in. Government raid. Corrupt judge. Min Suk's family suddenly offering help that felt more like a noose. And underneath it all, the DNA evidence that shouldn't exist because Choi Tae-hyun was Jehun's biological father. Min Suk had never lied about that, which meant someone had falsified the results. They're lying, Min Suk said quietly, coming to stand beside him. Jehun had been put down for a nap, leaving them alone with their fears. About wanting to reconcile. They don't care about me or Jehun. They want something. Access, Minju agreed. To my organization, my resources, or... He stopped, a terrible thought forming. To you. A bonded Omega is protected by pack law, but family can petition for guardianship if they prove the Alpha is unfit. Min Suk's hand went to his still flat stomach. They wouldn't. They would. Minju pulled him close, breathing in his mate's scent to calm his raging alpha instincts. This is coordinated. The DNA results, the raid, your parents. Someone's orchestrating all of it. Who? I don't know yet. That admission tasted like failure. But they know enough about my operations to guide federal agents. They have access to medical records for the DNA test. They can influence judges and time attacks perfectly. Minju's jaw clenched. It's someone close. Someone I trust. The bond hummed with their shared fear as Min Suk pressed against him. What do? We trust no one, Minju said grimly. And we prepare for war. But even as he said it, he knew they were already surrounded. The question wasn't if the trap would spring. It was when, and how much they'd lose when it did. The file arrived at midnight, delivered by Minju's most discreet investigator with an expression that promised nightmares. You said to dig into the Lee family's past, the man said, sliding a worn folder across Minju's desk. I found something. You're not going to like it. Minju opened the file with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. Years of control kept his expression neutral, even as the first page made his vision pulse red at the edges. Employment records. Lee household. 26 years ago. Kang Yoon-hee. Omega. Position, housemaid. His mother's name. His mother's photo. Young, beautiful, with the same dark eyes Minju saw in his own reflection. Working in the Lee family mansion the year before Minju was born. Keep reading, the investigator said quietly. Police report. Fall down the main staircase. Kang Yoon-hee, age 24, died on impact. 8 months pregnant. Investigation concluded. Accidental death. Case closed within 48 hours at the family's request. No criminal charges filed. Generous settlement paid to the victim's alpha mate for emotional distress and lost wages. Minju's father had taken money for his pregnant Omega's death and never spoken of it. Never told Minju that his mother died carrying his sibling. Never mentioned she'd worked for one of Seoul's wealthiest families. There's more, the investigator continued, pulling out another document. Medical examiner's preliminary notes before the case was closed. Injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. Defensive wounds on her hands. Bruising suggesting she was pushed. They murdered her. Minju's voice came out flat, emotionless, while his alpha biology screamed for blood. The Lee family killed my mother and covered it up. Looks that way. And sir, the investigator hesitated. Lee Min-suk would have been born that same year. He's exactly the same age as you. He was an infant in that house when it happened. The implication hung in the air like poison. Min-suk's parents had killed Minju's mother. The families weren't just randomly connected. They were bound by murder and cover-up and money exchanged for silence. Does he know? Minju asked, though he already knew the answer. He would have felt it through their bond if Min-suk was hiding something this massive. No evidence suggests he was ever told. He was a baby. By the time he'd be old enough to understand, the case was buried. Literally, your mother's death certificate lists cause as accidental trauma. Nothing in the public record suggests foul play. Minju stared at the photos, his mother's young face, the mansion's grand staircase, the closed case file. 26 years of silence. His father had died when Minju was 12, taking the truth to his grave. And Minju had spent his entire life not knowing his mother's death wasn't random tragedy, but calculated murder. Find me everything, he said. Every servant who worked there. Every police officer who touched the investigation. Every lawyer who helped bury it. I want names, addresses, and current status. Sir, if you're planning. I'm planning to know who killed my mother and why. Minju's eyes flashed gold. What I do with that information remains to be seen. After the investigator left, Minju sat alone in his office as dawn broke over Seoul. The file lay open on his desk like an accusation. His mate, the Omega he'd claimed, the person he trusted more than anyone, was the child of his mother's murderers. The bond hummed with Min-suk's sleeping presence, warm and trusting on the other side of the penthouse. Unaware that their connection was built on blood and lies. Minju didn't tell him immediately. Spent 3 days investigating further, confirming every detail, hoping somehow the investigator was wrong. But the evidence only mounted. Witness statements that had been sealed. Payments to police officers. His father's bank records showing a deposit of $50 million won the week after his mother's death. Blood money for silence. The Lee family had bought their way out of murder. And now they wanted back into Min Suk's life, offering help with perfect timing. Because they knew. Had to know. This wasn't coincidence. You've been avoiding me, Min Suk said on the fourth morning, finding Min Ju in his office at dawn. I can feel it through the bond. Something's wrong. Sit down, Min Ju said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. Min Suk's fear scent spiked. What happened? Is it the custody case? The investigation. It's your parents. Min Ju slid the file across his desk, the motion feeling like betrayal. My investigator found something. About why they're really here. He watched Min Suk read, saw the exact moment understanding hit. His mate's face went pale, then red, then white again. The bond flooded with shock and horror, and a grief so profound Min Ju felt his own chest constrict. No, Min Suk whispered. No, this can't, my parents wouldn't. The evidence is conclusive. Min Ju forced himself to remain controlled, professional, even as everything in him wanted to rage. My mother worked in your family's home. She died there. And the case was buried with your family's money and influence. I didn't know. Min Suk's hands shook on the papers. I swear I didn't know. I was a baby I couldn't have. I know you didn't know. The words came out harsher than intended. But your parents did. They've known this entire time. Known exactly who I was when they showed up offering help. Min Suk looked up with tears streaming down his face. That's why they're here. Not to reconcile. Not to help. They're what? Trying to control the situation? Keep you from finding out. Or using it as leverage. Min Ju's jaw clenched. They know I want justice for my mother. They know what I'm capable of when someone threatens my family. Maybe they think they can negotiate. Keep quiet about their involvement if I let them into our lives. That's sick. Min Suk stood abruptly, the file falling to the floor. That's God, that's evil. Your mother was pregnant. She was 24 years old. 8 months pregnant with my sibling. Working in their home. Min Ju's control finally cracked, his voice breaking. And they pushed her down the stairs and paid to make it disappear. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared horror and the terrible knowledge that they couldn't unknow this. Their bond, their family, their entire relationship was built on a foundation of murder and cover-up. What do we do? Min Suk asked finally. I don't know. The admission tasted like failure. Part of me wants to destroy them, wants to make them pay for what they did. But they're your parents, and going after them might give them exactly the ammunition they need for the custody battle. Proof I'm too violent, too dangerous, too consumed with revenge to raise children. They killed your mother. Min Suk's voice shook with fury. You have every right. I have children to protect. Min Ju cut him off. And a mate who's pregnant. Whatever I want doesn't matter if acting on it costs me everything. Min Suk moved around the desk, reaching for Min Ju's hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I'd known, if there was anything I could have done. You were an infant. Min Ju pulled him close despite the complicated tangle of emotions choking him. This isn't your fault. But even as he said it, something had shifted between them. The bond felt strained, tainted by the knowledge of what Min Suk's family had done. Every time Min Ju looked at his mate, he'd see those employment records. That death certificate. His mother's young face and the stares that killed her. We can't let them near Jehun, Min Suk said against Min Ju's chest. Whatever they're planning, whatever they want, we can't give them access to our children. Agreed. Min Ju pressed his face into Min Suk's hair, breathing in his scent and trying to find the comfort that had always been there. But that means we're completely alone in this fight. No family support. Just us against the courts, the government, and whoever's orchestrating everything. Then we fight alone. Min Suk pulled back, his eyes fierce despite the tears. Together. No matter what. But as Min Ju held his mate and felt the bond strain under the weight of revealed secrets, he couldn't shake the feeling that alone was exactly where their enemies wanted them. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and tell me where you're watching from. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, which gave Min Ju 14 days to find answers about his mother's death, while simultaneously protecting his family from enemies closing in from every direction. He wasn't sleeping. Min Suk could feel it through their bond. The way Min Ju would slip out of bed at 3 a.m. to pore over old files, tracking down witnesses who'd worked at the Lee mansion 26 years ago. Most were dead or disappeared. The ones who remained refused to talk, their silence clearly bought and maintained. You need to rest, Min-suk said, finding his mate in the office again as dawn broke. The bond is making me exhausted because you're running on fumes. I'm fine. Min-ju didn't look up from the documents spread across his desk. I found the medical examiner who did the preliminary report. He's retired but still alive. If I can get him to testify about the defensive wounds. Min-ju. Min-suk moved to stand in front of the desk, forcing eye contact. You're spiraling. Obsessing over something that happened before either of us were born, while current threats are. Current threats are exactly why I need this. Min-ju's eyes flashed gold. Your parents murdered my mother. They're using that knowledge as leverage. If I can prove what they did, expose them publicly, they lose all their power. Or they destroy us first. Min-suk's hand went to his stomach, still flat but carrying the child that made him vulnerable under Pak law. Every hour you spend on revenge is an hour you're not protecting Jehun and the baby. The words hit like a physical blow. Min-ju's expression shuddered, and through the bond Min-suk felt his mate's anguish and rage and terrible, crushing guilt. You think I don't know that? Min-ju's voice dropped dangerously low. You think I'm not aware that every decision I make might cost us everything? I think you're letting your need for justice blind you to the trap they're setting. Min-suk held his ground despite his omega biology, screaming to submit to his alpha's dominance. They want you distracted, consumed with the past. It's working. Before Min-ju could respond, Kim Jae-sung appeared in the doorway. Sir? The lawyers need you for prep. The prosecution has submitted new evidence. Something in Kim's tone made Min-suk's instincts flare. He watched his mate's oldest friend, trying to identify what felt wrong. Kim had been acting strange lately, distracted, avoiding eye contact, leaving rooms when Min-suk entered. What kind of evidence? Min-ju demanded. Medical records. Photos. Kim's expression remained carefully neutral. They're claiming domestic abuse. That Min-suk has been to the emergency room 3 times in the past 6 months, with suspicious injuries. That's a lie, Min-suk said immediately. I haven't been to any hospital except for prenatal appointments. The records say otherwise. Kim slid a tablet across the desk. Fractured wrist. Bruised ribs. Concussion. All treated at Seoul National under your name and resident ID number. Min-suk stared at the fabricated medical files with dawning horror. They were sophisticated, perfect forgeries with his information, his signature, doctor's notes describing injuries consistent with domestic violence. Even photos of an Omega who resembled him enough to pass casual inspection, sporting bruises and defensive wounds. This is what they did to me before, Min-suk whispered. When I was with Choi, he sent me to hospitals, created a paper trail, then used it against me in court. They're using the same playbook. Except this time they're framing me as the abuser. Min-ju's hands clenched on the desk. How did they get your medical ID? Your biometric data? These aren't just photoshopped images. They're in the actual hospital system. Someone with access, Kim said. Internal hospital staff, or someone who can hack medical databases. Min-suk watched Kim deliver that information and felt his stomach drop. Because Kim controlled their security systems. Kim had access to all their personal information. Kim would know exactly how to fabricate this kind of evidence. We need to lock down all our data, Min-ju said, not seeing what Min-suk was seeing. Change access codes, verify every person with system privileges. I'll handle it, Kim offered quickly. Too quickly. I can run a full security audit by tonight. No. The word came out of Min-suk's mouth before he could stop it. Both alphas turned to stare at him. I mean, maybe we should bring in outside consultants. Fresh eyes. Someone not connected to our existing systems. Kim's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that looked like anger before smoothing back to professional concern. That would take time we don't have. The hearing is in 2 weeks. I can have results in 24 hours. Kim's right, Min-ju said, and Min-suk felt their bond strain further. We need fast answers. After Kim left to begin the audit, Min-suk pulled up their security logs on his personal tablet, the backup access Min-ju had given him for emergencies. He'd been monitoring them obsessively since noticing the discrepancies 3 days ago. Times when guards were reassigned without explanation. Gaps in surveillance footage. Entry logs that didn't match actual staff movements. All changes authorized by Kim Jae-sung. I need to show you something, Min-suk said carefully. Promise you'll look with an open mind. He walked Min-ju through the irregularities, watching his mate's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to dawning horror. These gaps. Min-ju's finger traced the surveillance blackouts on the screen. They correspond exactly with when the government raids happened. When your parents visited. When? When someone would need unmonitored access to move information or people, Min-suk finished. And they're all authorized by Kim. No. Min-ju stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Not Kim. He's been with me for 15 years. He's saved my life twice. He's acting strange, Min-suk pressed, hating himself for saying it but unable to stop. Avoiding conversations. Leaving when I enter rooms. Offering to handle security audits that would let him cover his tracks. You're paranoid because of what Choi did to you. But Min-ju's voice lacked conviction. You're seeing betrayal where there's just stress and coincidence. Am I? Min-suk pulled up another file. This is Kim's financial records from the background check you run on all employees. Look at the deposits from 3 months ago. Right when the DNA evidence would have been collected. The numbers were damning. Large deposits from shell corporations. Money Kim couldn't explain with his legitimate salary. Min-ju stared at the screen for a long time, his expression carefully blank. Through the bond, Min-suk felt his mate's world cracking apart. Kim wasn't just an employee. He was the closest thing Min-ju had to family. The one person he'd trusted absolutely in a world of constant betrayal. We need to verify this, Min-ju said finally, voice hollow. Quietly. If Kim is compromised, confronting him directly could. His phone rang. The lawyer, frantic. Turn on the news. Channel 7. Now. Min-suk grabbed the remote, and they both watched their lives explode across the screen in real time. Press conference. Choi Tae-hyun standing beside the Lee family looking somber and concerned. Behind them, blown-up images of the fabricated medical records. Photos of Min-suk's injuries. Expert testimony about domestic violence patterns in Omega Alpha bonds. We're not trying to destroy anyone, Lee Sang-wook said to the cameras. We just want our son and grandson safe. Kang Min-ju is a dangerous man with a violent history. The evidence speaks for itself. This is a coordinated character assassination, the lawyer said over the phone. They've timed it perfectly. 2 weeks before the hearing, maximum media coverage, public opinion turning before we can mount a defense. How did they get the medical records to leak? Min-ju demanded. Those were supposed to be sealed until. He stopped. Looked at Min-suk. They both knew. Someone had leaked them. Someone with access to their legal strategy, their evidence, their defense plans. Someone they'd trusted completely. Find Kim, Min-ju said into the phone, his voice turning to ice. Now. And lock down everything, files, systems, accounts. Nobody accesses anything without my direct authorization. Not even my inner circle. But when security went to find Kim Jae-sung, his office was empty. His computer wiped. His personal phone disconnected. And a USB drive left on his desk with a single file, a video message. Min-ju played it alone, not wanting Min-suk to see until he knew what it contained. But his mate stood beside him anyway, their bond humming with shared dread as Kim's face appeared on screen. If you're watching this, you figured it out, Kim said, his expression neutral. I'm sorry, Min-ju. But some opportunities are too good to refuse. Your enemies made me an offer I couldn't turn down. Money, legitimacy, a clean slate. All I had to do was give them what they needed to destroy you. The video cut to surveillance footage, Min-suk's medical appointments, Jaehoon's daycare schedule, Min-ju's personal calendar. Everything. 15 years of trust converted to ammunition. I held off as long as I could, Kim continued. But you made one fatal mistake. You fell in love. You became vulnerable. And vulnerable men don't survive in our world. They just drag everyone down with them. The video ended with coordinates and a timestamp for the next day. A meeting location. It's a trap, Min-suk said quietly. Obviously. Min-ju's hands trembled with the effort of controlling his rage. But we're out of options. Kim knows everything. Our security, our finances, our legal strategy. He can dismantle everything I've built. So what do we do? Min-ju looked at his mate, at the life they'd created together, at everything that hung in the balance. We prepare for war, and pray we're strong enough to survive it. But even as he said it, Min-suk felt their bond strain under the weight of betrayal. Because if they couldn't trust Kim, who'd been loyal for 15 years, who could they trust at all? Min-ju went to the meeting alone despite Min-suk's protests. The coordinates led to an abandoned warehouse in Incheon, cliché, but effective for what Kim clearly intended. A final conversation away from recording devices and witnesses. Or an execution. Min-ju arrived 30 minutes early with weapons he knew Kim would anticipate and contingency plans his former right-hand man would have already countered. 15 years of working together meant they knew each other's tactics intimately. which made this meeting either pointless or suicidal. He went anyway. Kim was waiting in the center of the empty space, looking older than Min-ju remembered. Tired. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across features Min-ju had once trusted with his life. "You came," Kim said, sounding genuinely surprised. "You knew I would." Min-ju kept his distance, hand near his concealed weapon. 15 years together. You know how I think. I thought I did. Kim's expression twisted with something complicated. Regret maybe, or the ghost of old loyalty. But then you bonded that Omega and adopted a baby, and suddenly I didn't recognize you at all. So you sold me out. Min-ju kept his voice flat, controlled, even as rage pulsed through his veins. How long? How long have you been working with them? 3 months. Kim pulled out a cigarette, lighting it with steady hands. Choi Tae-hyun approached me first. Said he wanted revenge for being denied his child. Offered money. I refused initially. I'm not that mercenary. Then why? Because your Omega's parents sweetened the deal. Kim took a long drag, smoke curling between them like a barrier. They didn't just offer money. They offered legitimacy. A clean record, legal business opportunities, political connections. Everything you've always dangled but never quite delivered because you need people like me too dirty to leave. The accusation stung because it was partially true. Min-ju had kept his inner circle bound by shared guilt and mutual leverage. Insurance against betrayal. Apparently not effective insurance. You could have asked, Min-ju said. I would have helped you transition out. Given you resources to build something legitimate. Would you? Kim laughed bitterly. Or would you have found reasons to keep me close? Keep me useful? That's what you do, Min-ju. You collect people and use them and tell yourself it's protection when it's really just control. I trusted you. You owned me. Kim's eyes flashed with old resentment. There's a difference. And when they offered me actual freedom, not the conditional, leashed version you provide, I took it. Min-ju forced himself to process past the betrayal, to think strategically. What did you give them? Everything. Kim's smile was cruel. Security protocols, financial records, your legal strategy, personal schedules. Every vulnerability you have, they now know. The fabricated medical records? I provided Min Suk's biometric data. The surveillance gaps? My creation. The coordination between Choi, the Lee family, and the government task force? I facilitated all of it. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Kim had systematically dismantled every defense Min-ju had built over 15 years. Why tell me this? Min-ju asked. Why not just disappear with your payment? Because I wanted you to know it was me. Kim's voice hardened. I wanted you to understand what it feels like to have someone you trust completely destroy you from the inside out. This is about more than money and legitimacy. Min-ju saw it now in Kim's expression, the deep, festering wound beneath the practical justifications. This is personal. You're goddamn right it's personal. Kim's control finally cracked, voice rising. Do you remember So Young? My Omega? The one who died 8 years ago. Min-ju remembered. Kim had been destroyed for months after his mate's death from cancer. Min-ju had given him time off, paid for the funeral, offered support. I was there, Min-ju said quietly. I helped. You moved on, Kim interrupted savagely. 6 months later, you were back to your cold, untouchable self, preaching about how attachment was weakness, how bonding was foolish, how you'd never make that mistake because look what it did to people like me, broke them, made them useless. The words hit like physical blows because Min-ju remembered saying them, believed them at the time. And I accepted it, Kim continued. Told myself you were right, that loving So Young had made me weak, that I should be grateful for the lesson, even if it killed something inside me. His hands trembled around the cigarette. Then you bonded Min Suk. Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. You're jealous. I'm enraged. Kim's eyes blazed. You spent 8 years telling me attachment was fatal, that I was better off alone, that my grief was making me useless. Then you meet some pretty Omega with a baby and suddenly none of that applies? Suddenly you're playing house and smiling and acting like love isn't the most dangerous thing in the world. So you decided to destroy it. Min-ju felt something cold settle in his chest. Destroy me for finding what you lost. I decided to teach you the lesson you taught me. Kim ground out the cigarette with violent force. That attachment is weakness. That love makes you vulnerable. That the moment you let yourself care, your enemies will use it to gut you. By working with the people who killed my mother. Min-ju's voice dropped to deadly quiet. Yes, I know about that too. The Lee family murdered her. And you're helping them. Kim had the grace to look uncomfortable. I didn't know that when I started. By the time I found out, You were already committed. Minju finished. Already paid. Already too deep to back out even if you wanted to. I don't want to back out. But Kim's voice lacked conviction. You deserve this. You deserve to know what it feels like to have everything ripped away. Even if it means hurting an innocent Omega and 2 children? Min Suk isn't innocent. He's the son of murderers. Kim's justification sounded hollow even to himself. And the children, their leverage. No one's actually going to hurt them. You believe that? Minju asked. You really think Choi Tae-hyun and the Lee family will just walk away once they get what they want? That they'll keep their promises to you? Silence. Kim's expression flickered with doubt. They're using you, Minju pressed. Just like you claim I did. Except when they're done, you won't have 15 years of loyalty to fall back on. You'll be a loose end. And loose ends get cut. Stop trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to save your life. Minju took a step forward. Kim, please. Whatever damage you've done, we can. There's no we anymore. Kim pulled a gun, not pointing it but making his position clear. I came here to tell you face to face what I've done. To watch you realize you're going to lose everything. Your mate, your children, your empire, all of it. Because you made the fatal mistake of caring. If caring is fatal, then kill me. Minju spread his arms. Right here. Right now. Because I'm not giving them up. I'm not walking away from my family to save myself. Kim's gun hand trembled. For a moment, Minju saw his old friend behind the betrayal. The man who'd saved his life twice, who'd stood beside him through gang wars and government investigations, who'd been loyal until grief and jealousy poisoned him. I can't, Kim whispered. I can't kill you. Even now, after everything. Then help me. Minju's voice turned urgent. Tell me what they're planning. Give me something to fight back with. You say you wanted me to learn about vulnerability? I have. I'm standing here begging my oldest friend for help protecting my family. Is that not vulnerable enough? Kim's expression warred with itself, resentment and old loyalty tearing him apart. They're moving the custody hearing up. Tomorrow morning. They have the judge, the evidence, the character witnesses all lined up. You'll be declared an unfit guardian by noon. And then they take Jahun into protective custody. Kim's voice went hollow. And Min Suk, they're going to argue he's being coerced through the bond. That he needs to be separated from you for his own safety. Especially while pregnant. The plan was elegant and devastating. Strip Min Ju of his family using the legal system, leaving him with no recourse that wouldn't prove their point about him being dangerous. There's more, Kim continued reluctantly. The Lee family isn't just doing this for control. They're terrified you'll expose them for your mother's murder. This whole thing, the custody battle, the character assassination, it's about neutralizing you before you can destroy them. Will you testify? Minju asked. Tell the truth about the fabricated evidence. I can't. Kim's face twisted with genuine regret. They have insurance on me. Evidence of my role in your organization. If I betray them, I go to prison for decades. So you'll let them destroy an innocent family to save yourself. I'll let them destroy you to survive. Kim's voice hardened again. The Omega and children, they'll be fine. Probably better off without being targets in your world. You don't believe that. I have to. Kim backed toward the exit. Because the alternative is admitting I've become exactly what I hated. And I'm not ready to face that yet. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Min Ju alone in the empty warehouse with the weight of complete betrayal crushing down on him. Min Ju returned to the penthouse to find Min Suk pacing, Jahun asleep in his arms. What happened? Kim confirmed everything. Min Ju's voice came out dead, exhausted. He's been working with them for 3 months. Gave them access to everything. And the hearing's been moved up. It's tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Min Suk's fear scent exploded. But we're not ready. We don't have anything. Min Ju sank into a chair, the reality finally hitting him. No defense. No allies. No security that isn't compromised. Kim made sure of that. Min Suk set Jahun in his crib and came to kneel in front of Min Ju, taking his hands. Then we run. We take Jahun and disappear. You have resources, connections. Running makes me look guilty. Proves their case. Min Ju pulled Min Suk close, breathing in his mate's scent and trying to find comfort in the bond. And they'd find us. Kim knows every safe house, every contact, every escape route I have. So what do we do? Min Ju held his pregnant mate and his sleeping son and felt the walls closing in. We go to court tomorrow. And we pray that 15 years of reputation for being ruthless counts for something when it actually matters. But even as he said it, he knew they were walking into an ambush. And this time, he had no way to fight back without losing everything. The prenatal appointment was scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m., a time Min-ju had specifically chosen because it coincided with a mandatory government meeting he couldn't avoid. The timing was unfortunate but unavoidable, and they'd planned accordingly. 3 guards, Min-ju said for the 4th time that morning, checking Min-suk's security detail personally. Stay in public areas. Don't let him out of your sight. And if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. We've got him, boss, Park Hyun-woo assured him. Park was one of their longest-serving security, someone who'd been with them since before the bonding. Someone Kim hadn't had time to corrupt. Min-ju hoped. I'll be fine, Min-suk said, pressing against Min-ju's side. The bond hummed with his mate's mixture of nervousness and determination. It's just a checkup. Routine ultrasound. We'll be back before you're done with the prosecutors. Take your phone. Keep it on. And if your parents show up, I leave immediately. Min-suk had been through this briefing 3 times already. Min-ju, I know you're terrified. I can feel it through the bond. But we can't let them paralyze us with fear. Min-ju pulled his mate close, breathing in his scent, pressing a hand to Min-suk's stomach where their child grew. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. Min-suk kissed him, soft and reassuring. Go deal with the government. I'll text you updates from every step. Min-ju forced himself to leave, climbing into his car with the weight of premonition heavy on his shoulders. Something felt wrong. Had felt wrong since Kim's betrayal was exposed. But he couldn't identify the specific threat, couldn't justify canceling a crucial government meeting based on vague unease. The meeting was exactly as tedious and hostile as expected. Prosecutors laying out evidence, demanding explanations, threatening charges. Min-ju answered with practiced calm while his phone sat on the table in front of him, waiting for Min-suk's promised updates. First text came at 2:15 p.m. Arrived safely. Waiting room is empty. Guards stationed outside. Second text at 2:30 p.m. Ultrasound starting. Baby looks good. Doctor says everything is progressing normally. Min-ju allowed himself to relax fractionally. See, paranoia for nothing. Min-suk was safe in a hospital with security and medical staff. Nothing could. His phone rang. Park Hyun-woo. Not texting. Calling. During a supposedly routine appointment. Min-ju answered before the second ring. What happened? Sir, we have a situation. Park's voice carried barely controlled panic. Min-suk went into the examination room. Standard procedure, we stayed outside. But it's been 40 minutes, Anne. 40 minutes? Min-ju was already moving, the prosecutors forgotten. Why the fuck didn't you check after 20? The nurse said it was normal. Said the ultrasound was taking longer because they wanted detailed measurements for the... Park's voice cracked. Sir, we just broke protocol and entered. The room is empty. There's a service exit we didn't know about. And Min-suk's phone is still here, but he's gone. The world tilted. Min-ju's vision pulsed red at the edges as his alpha biology screamed made in danger, protect, find, kill. Lock down the hospital. Now. Nobody leaves. Check all security footage. And find out who that fucking nurse was. He was in his car before Park could respond, driving with a recklessness that would have killed anyone less experienced. His phone rang continuously, Park with updates, his lawyers demanding to know where he'd gone, government prosecutors threatening contempt charges for leaving mid-testimony. Min-ju ignored all of it except Park's increasingly desperate reports. The nurse was fake. Name badge stolen from an employee on vacation. No identification in the system. Service exit leads to a parking garage. Camera footage shows Min-suk being let out. He's walking on his own but looks confused. Drugged maybe. Vehicle is a white van. Plates are stolen. No tracking available. Each update felt like a knife between the ribs. They'd taken his mate. His pregnant mate. And Min-ju had let it happen because he'd been too focused on government prosecutors to protect what actually mattered. He made it to the hospital in 15 minutes. Park met him at the entrance with Min-suk's phone and something else. An envelope with Min-ju's name written in elegant script. This was left in the examination room, Park said. Pinned to the wall with a knife. Min-ju opened it with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. Inside, a single sheet of expensive paper with a typed message and a photograph. The photo showed Min-suk unconscious in what looked like a basement, his hands zip-tied, his body positioned carefully to show his vulnerable state without visible injury. Professional. Calculated to cause maximum emotional damage without giving Min-ju justification for immediate violence. The message was worse. Come alone to where your mother died, or the Omega and both babies die. You have until midnight. No police. No backup. No weapons. Just you, finally facing what you've been avoiding for 26 years. The Lee family mansion. The staircase where Kong Yoon-hee fell. Where everything began. Where everything ends. Come say goodbye to your mother properly. Or we'll send your mate, an unborn child, to join her. Min-ju read it twice, his alpha biology warring with his rational mind. This was obviously a trap. Obviously designed to lure him into an ambush where he'd be helpless. Kim would have planned for every contingency, every weapon Min-ju might bring, every backup he might call. Sir? Park's voice seemed to come from very far away. Orders. Min-ju looked at the photograph of his unconscious mate, at the message forcing him to confront his mother's murder, at the impossible choice they'd engineered with perfect precision. His phone buzzed. A video message from an unknown number. He played it, knowing it would destroy him, unable to stop himself. Min Suk, awake now but still restrained, in what was clearly the Lee family mansion's basement. The video was professionally shot, well lit, designed for maximum impact. Min Suk's eyes were wide with fear but also drugged confusion, his scent probably broadcasting distress that Min-ju could almost feel through the screen. Min-ju. His mate's voice was slurred but recognizable. Don't come. It's a trap. They're going to. A hand appeared, covering Min Suk's mouth. The camera panned to show Choi Tae-hyun's face, smiling with predatory satisfaction. Hello, Kang-sai. As you can see, we have something valuable of yours. Well, 3 valuable things technically. Choi's hand moved to rest on Min Suk's stomach in a gesture of possessive threat that made Min-ju's vision blur with rage. Your mate is comfortable for now. Unharmed. We have no desire to hurt him or the babies, assuming you cooperate. The camera shifted again, showing Lee Sang-wook and Park Myung standing in what Min-ju recognized with sick certainty as the mansion's main hall. The staircase where his mother died was visible behind them, polished marble gleaming under chandelier light. 26 years ago, something tragic happened in this house, Lee Sang-wook said, his voice carrying false sympathy. A young Omega fell to her death. An accident, according to all official records. But we know you've been investigating. Know you've found inconsistencies. We're prepared to tell you the truth, Park Myung added. Everything that happened that night. Who was responsible? Why it was necessary. All the answers you've been seeking. In exchange, Choi continued, you come alone. No weapons. No backup. No recording devices. You face your family's tragedy like a man. And afterward, we negotiate terms for your mate and children's safe return. Midnight, Lee Sang-wook repeated. The mansion address will be texted to you. Come alone or Min Suk dies. Bring backup and Min Suk dies. Contact authorities and Min Suk dies. Try any of your clever mafia tactics, and well, you understand the pattern. The video ended with a final shot of Min Suk, tears streaming down his face, mouthing words Min-ju lip-read with devastating clarity. I love you. Save the babies. Don't sacrifice yourself for me. The phone slipped from Min-ju's grip. Park caught it, staring at his boss with open concern. Sir? What are your orders? Min-ju stood in the hospital corridor, surrounded by his remaining security, with the weight of impossible choices crushing down on him. Go to the mansion alone and walk into obvious ambush. Or refuse and let his mate and unborn child die while he stayed safe. Not really a choice at all. Stand down, Min-ju heard himself say. All of you. This is over. Boss, we can raid the mansion. We have the manpower. And they'll kill Min Suk the moment they detect it. Min-ju's voice came out dead hollow. Kim designed this. He knows every tactical approach I might use. Every contingency. Every backup plan. The only variable he can't control is what I do when I'm alone and powerless. You can't seriously be considering. I'm not considering anything. Min-ju pulled out his gun and handed it to Park. I'm going. Alone. Unarmed. Exactly as they demanded. That's suicide. That's the price. Min-ju checked his watch. 6:47 p.m. 5 hours and 13 minutes until midnight. If I'm not back by dawn, take everything. All the evidence, all the files, everything, and burn it down. The Lee family, Choi, everyone involved. Scorched earth. Make them regret they were ever born. And if you die? Min-ju thought about Min Suk's face in the video. About Jehun sleeping safely in the penthouse with emergency security. About the child growing in his mate's belly who deserved a chance to be born. Then I die protecting my family, he said simply. Which is exactly what an alpha is supposed to do. He walked out of the hospital into Seoul's evening streets, feeling the bond pulse with Min Suk's fear and drugged confusion. 5 hours until midnight. 5 hours to prepare for walking unarmed into the place where his mother died, to face the people who'd killed her, to make whatever bargain kept his mate and children alive. Min-ju had spent 15 years believing attachment was weakness. That love made you vulnerable. That the moment you let yourself care, your enemies would use it to destroy you. Kim had been right about that. Choi and the Lee family were proving it now. But what Kim didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that Min-ju would rather die vulnerable and loving than live untouchable and alone. He'd spent 15 years as a weapon. Tonight, he'd be a father. And if that cost him everything, then everything was a price he'd pay willingly. The address came through at 11:30 p.m. The Lee family mansion on the outskirts of Seoul, isolated and perfect for an ambush. Min-ju drove there alone, unarmed, with nothing but his bond to Min-suk and the desperate hope that surrender might save the people who made his life worth living. The mansion loomed ahead, every window lit like a stage set for tragedy. Min-ju parked and walked toward the entrance, toward his mother's ghost and his mate's captors and the staircase where everything began. Whatever happened next, at least he'd face it on his feet. For Min-suk, for their children, for the family he'd never expected to have and couldn't imagine living without. The doors opened. Min-ju stepped inside, and the trap closed around him like a fist. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and tell me where you're watching from. The moment Min-ju stepped out of the hospital, something fundamental broke inside him. Not the careful control he'd maintained for 15 years. Not the cold calculation that had built his empire. Those shattered completely, leaving behind something raw and primal and absolutely lethal. They'd taken his pregnant mate, drugged him, tied him up, threatened his unborn child. Seoul was about to learn the difference between the ghost, a calculated predator who killed strategically, and a bonded alpha whose family had been stolen. "Get me every address," Min-ju said into his phone, his voice carrying a flatness that made his remaining security physically recoil. Choi Tae-hyun's properties, businesses, known associates. The Lee family's holdings, all of them. Every corrupt official who's been paid off. Every judge who took their money. Every lawyer who filed false evidence. I want locations, names, and real-time surveillance. Now, sir, the midnight deadline. I have 5 hours. Min-ju checked his weapons with methodical precision. He'd told Park he was going unarmed. He'd lied. That's enough time to remind everyone involved exactly why they used to fear me. The first target was Judge Kim Tae-won's private residence in Gangnam. Min-ju didn't bother with subtlety or surveillance. He walked through the front door, literally through it, the reinforced with splintering under his alpha strength, and found the judge eating dinner with his family. Out, Min-ju told the wife and children, his alpha command brooking no argument. They fled. The judge tried to follow, but Min-ju's hand on his shoulder stopped him with crushing force. Kong SSI, this is, you can't just. How much did they pay you? Min-ju's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. To rig the custody hearing. To accept false evidence. To prepare to take my son from me. I don't know what you're talking about. Min-ju's fist drove into the mahogany dining table, cracking it down the center. Try again. And remember that my mate is currently tied up in a basement because of your corruption. So I'm not feeling particularly patient. The judge's face went white. 20 million won. They said it was just ensuring the child's safety. That you were dangerous, and where's the Lee Mansion security detail stationed? Min-ju interrupted. How many guards? What's their rotation schedule? They didn't tell me operational details. Then you're useless to me. Min-ju pulled out his phone, snapping a photo of the judge's terrified face. By morning, every prosecutor in Seoul will have evidence of your bribery. Your career is over. Your reputation is destroyed. And if my mate or child is harmed, I will personally ensure your family learns what happened to you. He left the judge sobbing in his broken dining room and moved to the next target. Prosecutor Yang, who'd been feeding information to the task force with suspiciously detailed knowledge of Min-ju's operations. Min-ju found him at his office, working late, and had a very brief conversation that ended with Yang providing names of every official who'd been compromised and the location of the backup security station monitoring the Lee Mansion. Then the corrupt social worker who'd filed false reports. The hospital administrator who'd helped create fake medical records. Each stop was swift and brutal, Min-ju extracting information or destroying credibility with equal efficiency. His people scrambled to keep up, and used to seeing their boss operate without the careful planning that usually characterized his approach. This wasn't strategy. This was a wildfire consuming everything in its path. Boss, you're leaving a trail, Park warned over the phone. Every place you hit, you're creating evidence that could. I don't care about evidence. Min-ju was already moving toward his next target, one of Choi's business partners who'd helped fund the conspiracy. They have my mate. They threaten my children. There are no rules anymore. The business partner, a real estate developer named Shin, tried to run when Min-ju entered his office building. Didn't matter. Min-ju caught him in the parking garage and had a very educational conversation about Choi's financial vulnerabilities and which offshore accounts were funding the operation. He's leveraged everything, Shin gasped, pinned against his luxury car. The kidnapping, the legal battle, it's bankrupting him. If this doesn't work, if he doesn't get control of Min's sook and access to your resources, he's ruined. Good. Min-ju released him with disgust. Tell Choi that if he hurts my mate, bankruptcy will be the least of his problems. I'll take everything, his businesses, his reputation, his life. And I'll make sure he watches it all burn before I kill him. By 9 p.m., Min-ju had torn through 8 locations, left a trail of terrified conspirators, and gathered enough intelligence to know the Lee mansion had 12 guards, rotating shifts every 4 hours, with the next change at midnight. Perfect timing for when they expected him to arrive helpless and alone. His phone rang. Kim Jae-sung. Min-ju answered despite every instinct screaming not to. You need to stop, Kim said without preamble. Whatever you're doing, this rampage through the city, you're making it worse. Worse than my pregnant mate being kidnapped. Min-ju's laugh was devoid of humor. Worse than my children being threatened? Please, explain how I could make this worse. They're watching you. Every move you make, they're tracking. And every act of violence gives them more ammunition for the custody case. You're proving you're exactly as dangerous as they claim. I am exactly that dangerous. Min-ju pulled up to his next location, a warehouse where the Lee family stored security equipment. I've spent 15 years pretending to be controlled. Civilized. But you know what I really am, Kim. You helped build this monster. I built a strategic thinker. Not a father. Min-ju cut the connection and entered the warehouse. 10 minutes later, the building was in flames, 5 guards were unconscious, and Min-ju had the access codes to the mansion's security system. Not that he planned to use them. Walking into the trap was still his best option for getting Min-suk out alive. But they didn't need to know he had that advantage. 10:15 p.m. Less than 2 hours until the deadline. Min-ju stood outside one final location, the private club where Seoul's elite gathered, where he knew both Choi's and the Lee family's allies would be celebrating their supposed victory. He walked in through the front entrance, past security who took one look at his expression and wisely stepped aside. The club's main room fell silent as Min-ju entered, every conversation dying as Seoul's most dangerous alpha surveyed the crowd. I know some of you are involved, Min-ju said, his voice carrying to every corner. You helped plan this, funded it, provided resources or information or legal cover. And right now, you're congratulating yourselves on taking down the ghost of Seoul. He smiled, and several people physically recoiled. Here's what's going to happen. At midnight, I'm going to the Lee mansion alone and unarmed as demanded. I'm going to negotiate for my mate's safe return. And I'm probably going to die doing it, because that's obviously their plan. Min-ju's eyes flashed gold, his alpha presence filling the room with suffocating pressure. But before I go, I want you all to understand something very clearly. He pulled out his phone, displaying a document. This is my will, already filed with my lawyers and multiple government agencies. In the event of my death, every piece of evidence I've gathered over 15 years goes public. Every bribe, every corruption, every dirty secret about Seoul's elite released. Everyone in this room who's ever touched my organization or taken my money or made deals in the shadows will be exposed. The silence was absolute. And more importantly, Min-ju continued, I've arranged for my most loyal people to continue operations under new leadership. Not legitimate business, pure vengeance. They have instructions to systematically destroy everyone involved in harming my family. Your businesses will collapse. Your reputations will burn. Your families will learn exactly what you are. He met the eyes of several known associates of Choi and the Lee family. So when you're celebrating my death tomorrow, remember, I built an empire that doesn't need me to function. And I've aimed that empire at every single one of you. Min-ju walked out into the Seoul night, leaving behind a room full of people who were just beginning to understand what they'd unleashed. 11 p.m. 1 hour until the deadline. Min-ju drove toward the outskirts of the city, toward the mansion where his mother died and his mate was being held. His phone buzzed with updates from his people. The judge had already leaked information about the conspiracy to protect himself. 3 of Choi's businesses had been raided by suddenly motivated police. The Lee family's political allies were scrambling to distance themselves. The rampage had worked exactly as intended, not to rescue Min Suk, but to ensure that even if Min Ju died tonight, everyone involved would face consequences. The trap at the mansion might kill him, but he'd made certain his death would destroy them all. His bond with Min Suk pulsed with his mate's fear and drugged confusion, but also, faintly, pride. Min Suk could feel what Min Ju was doing through their connection. Could feel the Alpha's absolute commitment to protecting their family at any cost. 11:30 p.m. Min Ju pulled up to the Lee mansion, its windows blazing with light. He'd spent the past 5 hours reminding Seoul why they used to fear him. Now he'd spend whatever time remained showing them why love made him even more dangerous than hate ever had. He walked toward the entrance, unarmed as promised, but carrying something far more lethal. The absolute certainty that he would save his mate or die trying. The doors opened. Choi Tae-hyun stood in the entrance hall, smiling. "Welcome, Kang Asai. We've been expecting you." "Where's my mate?" Min Ju's voice was utterly calm. "Downstairs. Safe. For now." Choi gestured toward the infamous staircase. "But first, we have some things to discuss. About your mother. About what really happened 26 years ago. About the price of truth." Min Ju looked at the stairs where Kang Yoon-hee had died and felt his mother's ghost hovering in the space between revenge and redemption. "Then let's talk," he said, and stepped into the trap that might be his tomb. But Seoul would remember this night. Would remember what happened when you took everything from an alpha who'd finally learned to love. The ghost was dead. What remained was far, far worse. The Lee mansion's interior was exactly as Min Ju remembered from the investigators' photos. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the sweeping staircase where his mother had died. Lee Sang-wook and Park Mi-young stood at the top of those stairs like monarchs surveying their domain, with Choi Tae-hyun flanking them. "You came alone," Lee Sang-wook observed. "Surprising. I expected at least a small army hidden in the shadows." "Where's Min Suk?" Min Ju kept his voice level despite the bond screaming with his mate's proximity and distress. "Downstairs. Comfortable. Unharmed." Park Mi-young's smile was cold. "You'll see him shortly. But first, we need to have a conversation about the past. About how you murdered my mother." Min Ju's eyes tracked every exit, every potential threat. 12 guards visible, probably more hidden. Explosives wired throughout the building. He could see the telltale signs now that he knew to look. "About how you pushed a pregnant Omega down these stairs and paid to cover it up." "It wasn't murder," Lee Sang-wook said calmly. "It was necessity." The casual admission hit like a physical blow. "Explain that." "Your mother was stealing from us," Park Mi-young continued. "We caught her with jewelry, cash, documents. When we confronted her, she became hysterical. Threatened to go to the police, claim we'd abused her. We couldn't allow that kind of scandal. So you killed her." "We argued," Lee Sang-wook corrected. "At the top of these stairs. She lunged at my wife. I pushed her away. She lost her balance." He shrugged. "Tragic accident. Made more tragic because she'd been warned multiple times about her behavior. The lies were so smooth, so practiced." Min Ju recognized the story they'd told themselves for 26 years to justify murder. "And the baby she was carrying?" Min Ju's voice dropped dangerously low. "My sibling? Was that also just tragic?" "Collateral damage," Choi interjected. "Like all unwanted Omega pregnancies. Speaking of which, your current mate is carrying cargo that could be similarly expendable if you don't cooperate." Min Ju's alpha instincts roared, but he forced himself still. "What do you want?" "We want you gone." Lee Sang-wook descended the stairs with measured steps. "You're a threat to our family, to our reputation. This custody battle was never about Jahun. It was about neutralizing you before you could expose us. So here's the deal," Park Mi-young said. "You walk away. Sign documents relinquishing all rights to Min Suk and both children. Leave Korea permanently. In exchange, we give you all the evidence about your mother's death. Recorded confessions, documents, everything you'd need to destroy us. But you won't use it," Lee Sang-wook continued. "Because the moment you do, we activate the insurance policy." He held up a tablet showing a live feed. Min Suk in the basement, unconscious again, surrounded by enough explosives to level the building. "One signal from any of us," Choi explained, "and this entire mansion becomes your mate's tomb. So you take your evidence, you leave the country, and everyone survives. Min Suk and the children will be well cared for under our protection." "Protection?" Min Ju's laugh was hollow. "You mean control?" Call it what you want. Park Mi-young's expression was merciless. But you have 5 minutes to decide. Walk away with your revenge or stay and watch your family die. Min-ju looked at the tablet, at his unconscious mate surrounded by explosives. Looked at the stairs where his mother died. Looked at the 3 people who'd orchestrated everything. His mother's murder, Min-suk's kidnapping, the destruction of everything he'd built. The choice they'd engineered was elegant. His mother's justice or his family's survival. The revenge he'd wanted for 15 years or the love he'd found 6 months ago. No deal, Min-ju said quietly. I'm sorry. Lee Sang-wook's confidence flickered. I said no. Min-ju met his eyes directly. You're going to release Min-suk. Unharmed. Right now. Or I start killing everyone in this building until someone does. We'll detonate. Go ahead. Min-ju's voice carried absolute conviction. Blow the building. Kill Min-suk. Prove to everyone in Seoul exactly what you are. But I'll survive the explosion. Alphas are hard to kill. And I promise you, what I do afterward will make you wish you'd died with him. The 3 conspirators exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't in their script. You're bluffing, Choi said. You love him too much to. I love him too much to let him spend his life as your prisoner. Min-ju took a step forward. So here's my counteroffer. Release him now, face justice for your crimes, and maybe, you survive the night. Or play your games, and I show you what happens when you give a desperate alpha nothing left to lose. You came here unarmed. Park Mi-young's voice wavered slightly. You can't. Min-ju smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression any of them had ever seen. Did I? The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Lee Sang-wook's hand moved toward the detonator in his pocket. Min-ju moved faster. He'd lied about being unarmed, had a knife strapped to his calf that metal detectors wouldn't catch. He closed the distance to Lee Sang-wook in 2 strides, the blade at the older alpha's throat before anyone could react. Call off the explosives, Min-ju commanded. Now! You'll never make it out, Choi said, but his hand moved to his phone. Guards are all ready. The building shook. Not from explosives, from something else. A deep rumble that made the chandeliers sway and dust fall from the ceiling. What? Park Mi-young's eyes widened. That's not supposed to. Another rumble. Louder. The staircase cracked, marble splitting down the center. The detonator, Min-ju realized with horror. Someone triggered it remotely. Impossible, Lee Sang-wook gasped. It's biometric locked to the 3 of Kim. Min-ju's blood ran cold. Kim had access to your systems. He's setting off the explosives. Min-suk. Min-ju released Lee Sang-wook and ran for the basement stairs as the mansion shook apart. Behind him, he heard the 3 conspirators scrambling for exits, heard guards shouting, heard the structure giving way. None of it mattered. Only getting to Min-suk before the building crushed them both. He made it to the basement as another explosion rocked the foundation. The room where they'd been holding Min-suk was filled with smoke and debris. Min-ju crashed through, calling his mate's name, feeling through the bond for. Empty. The restraints were cut. The explosives disarmed. Min-suk was gone. Looking for someone? A voice called from above. Min-ju looked up through the collapsing floor to see Min-suk climbing up a service shaft, covered in dust but moving with surprising strength and precision. I got myself out, his mate called down, voice shaking but determined. Learn some things from living with a mafia boss. Now move before the ceiling kills you. Min-ju scrambled after him, climbing through smoke and falling debris as the mansion collapsed around them. He caught up to Min-suk in what remained of the first floor, pulling his mate against him as another explosion tore through the structure. How? Min-ju couldn't form complete thoughts. You were unconscious, tied up. Was faking. Min-suk coughed, clinging to Min-ju. The drugs wore off an hour ago. I pretended to stay out, waited for an opening. When the explosion started, I used the knife I stole from Choi's pocket, picked it when he was positioning me for the photo, and cut myself free. You, Min-ju's brain stuttered. You pickpocket Choi? You're not the only one who can be resourceful. Min-suk grabbed his hand. Now can we have this conversation after we're not dying? They ran for the exit as the mansion came down around them. Made it to the front entrance just as the staircase, the one where Min-ju's mother died, collapsed completely in a shower of marble and crystal. Outside, emergency vehicles were arriving. Min-ju's security swarmed them, checking for injuries, reporting that Lee Sang-wook and Park Mi-young were trapped in the rubble. Choi had escaped but was being hunted. Min-ju barely heard any of it. He was too focused on his mate, checking him over with desperate thoroughness, hands roaming for injuries, for signs their baby had been hurt. I'm okay, Min-suk said, catching his hands. We're okay. Both of us. You saved yourself. Min-ju's voice broke. You didn't wait for me to rescue you. You saved yourself. Learned from the best. Min-suk pressed against him, trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Though I was terrified the whole time that the plan wouldn't work. That I'd die before you got there. What plan? To trust that you'd come for me. Min-suk looked up at him with tears streaming down his face. To know that my alpha would walk into hell to bring me home. And to be strong enough to meet you halfway. Min-ju pulled him close, breathing in his mate's scent of smoke and fear, and underneath it all, survival. You're stronger than I ever knew. Had to be. Min-suk's laugh was shaky. Couldn't let you have all the dramatic rescue moments. Behind them, the mansion finished collapsing, taking with it the sight of his mother's death and the conspirators who'd orchestrated everything. Min-ju held his mate and their unborn child and watched his past burn. It's over, Min-suk whispered. Almost, Min-ju said grimly. Kim's still out there. Choi escaped. And we still have the custody hearing. But Min-suk was alive. Their baby was safe. And together, they'd survive the impossible. Whatever came next, they'd face it the same way. Together. The aftermath of the mansion collapse lasted 3 days. Lee Sang-wook died in the rubble, crushed when the staircase fell. Park Mi-young survived but suffered injuries that left her paralyzed. Choi Tae-hyun was found 2 days later trying to flee to China, brought back in chains to face charges that would keep him imprisoned for decades. Kim Jae-sung disappeared completely. No trace, no trail, just gone. But the real damage wasn't the deaths or the arrests, it was the exposure. The mansion's destruction triggered investigations that unraveled everything. Min-ju's organization, the Lee family's corruption, decades of bribery and violence and cover-ups all spilling into public record. They're offering a deal, Min-ju's lawyer said on day 4, finding him in the hospital where Min-suk was being monitored. The prosecutors. They want everything you know about organized crime in Seoul in exchange for immunity and witness protection. Immunity for what charges? Min-ju asked, though he already knew. All of them. Racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. They're willing to overlook 15 years of criminal activity if you give them the intelligence to dismantle the entire network. The lawyer's expression was carefully neutral. It's a good deal. Better than you'd get at trial. What are the terms? Complete cooperation. Names, locations, operations, financial records, everything. And then you disappear. New identities, new city, no contact with your former life. Witness protection for you, your mate, and both children. Min-suk from the hospital bed said quietly, That means giving up everything you built. Everything I built was a prison, Min-ju replied. He took his mate's hand, feeling the bond hum with shared understanding. This is a chance at actual freedom. The lawyer looked between them. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, they proceed with prosecution. After he left, Min-suk shifted carefully, mindful of the monitors tracking their baby's heartbeat. Are you sure? Your empire, your reputation, everything you spent 15 years. Means nothing compared to this. Min-ju pressed his hand to Min-suk's stomach. A week ago, I would have said my power defined me. That without it, I'd be nothing. But watching that mansion collapse, thinking I might lose you, I realized I've had it backwards my entire life. How so? I thought attachment made me weak. That needing people was vulnerability. Min-ju's voice roughened. But you saved yourself in that basement. You were strong when I couldn't protect you. And I'm sitting here realizing that loving you, having Jehun, this baby, that's not weakness. That's the only thing that's ever made me actually strong. Min-suk's eyes filled with tears. So we disappear? Start over somewhere new. We build something real. Min-ju kissed his knuckles. No more violence. No more looking over our shoulders. Just a life. A normal, boring, safe life where our children can grow up without armed guards and rival factions. You'll hate being normal. I'll love being alive. Min-ju smiled, and it reached his eyes for once. With you. That's all I need. They took the deal. Min-ju spent 2 months in protective custody, giving prosecutors everything. Names of crime bosses across 3 countries. Location of offshore accounts. Details of operations that had remained hidden for decades. He dismantled his own empire piece by piece, watching 15 years of work unravel in depositions and evidence logs. It should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like shedding armor that had been crushing him slowly for years. The custody hearing was cancelled. Choi's parental rights were terminated based on his criminal charges. The falsified DNA evidence was exposed. Jehun remained legally Min-ju's son, though that name would soon disappear into witness protection. Min Suk gave birth 4 months later in a secure government facility, surrounded by federal agents instead of family. A daughter, 7 pounds, with Min Suk's delicate features and Min Ju's dark eyes. They named her Mina. New beginning. 3 weeks after her birth, they left Seoul forever. New identities, new city, new lives waiting to be built from nothing. 2 years later, Professor Kong Junwoo stood at the front of his introduction to criminology class, watching undergraduates file in with the casual chaos of Friday afternoon. None of them knew their professor had once been Seoul's most dangerous alpha, that he'd built an empire on blood and violence before burning it all down to save his family. They just saw a slightly intimidating instructor who graded fairly and told disturbingly realistic stories about organized crime. Today we're discussing the psychology of criminal organizations, he said as the class settled. Why do people join them? What keeps them loyal? And what makes them walk away when others stay until death? The discussion ranged across theories and case studies. Min Ju, Junwoo now, always Junwoo, guided them through concepts he'd lived but could never admit. The weight of reputation. The trap of sunk costs. The moment when survival stops being enough. After class, he walked across campus to the small house the government had provided. Nothing like the penthouse. No marble floors or floor-to-ceiling windows. Just a modest home in a quiet neighborhood where no one cared about criminal empires or pack politics. It was perfect. Appa! Jehun crashed into his legs the moment he opened the door. 7 years old now and full of endless energy. Appa, I got a gold star in reading today. Miss Lee said my essay was really good. That's wonderful. Min Ju scooped him up despite his protests that he was too big. What was it about? My family. I wrote about how Amma runs the best daycare, and you're the smartest teacher and Mina is annoying, but I love her anyway. I heard that, came Min Suk's voice from the kitchen. Your sister is not annoying, she's 2. She's annoying and 2, Jehun corrected with the confidence of an older sibling. Min Ju carried him into the kitchen where Min Suk was preparing dinner with Mina clinging to his leg. Their daughter had discovered walking 3 months ago and now refused to be still for more than 30 seconds. How was class? Min Suk asked, accepting Min Ju's kiss. Good. Taught them about organizational loyalty structures. Kept wanting to tell them real examples, but settled for theoretical frameworks. Probably for the best. Min Suk smiled. The government tends to frown on professors outing themselves as former crime bosses. Former being the operative word. Min Ju crouched down as Mina toddled toward him, arms outstretched. Hello, sweetheart. Did you have a good day? Dada. Mina grabbed his face with sticky hands. Park. Go park. We went to the park this morning, Min Suk explained. She's obsessed. Wants to go every hour. Park. Mina insisted. Now. Tomorrow, Min Ju promised, standing with her in his arms. After Appa finishes work, we'll all go to the park together. They ate dinner at a table that had cost nothing compared to the furniture in his old penthouse, but meant infinitely more. Jehun talked nonstop about school. Mina threw food with delighted shrieks. Min Suk's foot found Min Ju's under the table, the bond humming with contentment. After the children were in bed, Jehun with a stack of library books, Mina after 3 escape attempts, Min Ju and Min Suk sat on their small back porch watching the sun set. Do you miss it? Min Suk asked quietly. The power. The empire. Being someone people feared. Min Ju thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss the certainty, knowing I could solve problems with money or force. But then I think about what that life cost, the isolation, the constant vigilance, the way I'd forgotten how to be anything other than a weapon. And now I'm Professor Kong who teaches criminology and coaches Jehun's soccer team and gets up at 2 a.m. when Mina has nightmares. Min Ju pulled Min Suk closer. I spent 15 years believing power was what made me valuable. That without it, I'd be nothing. You were never nothing. I know that now. Min Ju pressed his face into Min Suk's hair, breathing in the scent that still made his alpha biology sing with satisfaction. I was just too afraid to believe I could be loved for who I was instead of what I controlled. And now I understand I had it backwards. Min Ju's arms tightened around his mate. I thought I was the alpha who needed nothing. Spent years building walls and collecting power because needing people felt like weakness. But I was never meant to need nothing. I was meant to need everything. You, our children, this messy, ordinary, beautiful life. That's what actually makes me strong. Min Suk turned in his arms, eyes bright. No regrets. About giving up the empire? Not one. Min Ju kissed him softly. I traded violence for peace. Fear for love. A throne for a home. That's not a sacrifice. That's the best deal I ever made. A crash came from inside. Mina had escaped her crib again and was causing chaos. They could hear Jehun yelling for them, his voice mixing with his sister's delighted giggles. Duty calls, Min-suk said, smiling. Indeed. Min-ju stood, pulling his mate up with him. Come on. Let's go rescue our son from his sister. They went inside together, leaving the sunset behind, to deal with their beautiful, chaotic, perfectly ordinary family crisis. Later, after Mina was recaptured and both children finally asleep, Min-ju stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching Min-suk get ready for bed. His mate caught him staring. What? Just grateful. Min-ju's voice came out rougher than intended. 2 years ago, I thought choosing you meant losing everything. Turns out I was wrong. Choosing you meant gaining everything that actually matters. Min-suk crossed to him, taking his hands. We chose each other, and we're still choosing each other every day. That's what makes it work. I love you, Min-ju said, simple and true. You, Jehun, Mina, you're my empire now. My kingdom. Everything I need. Good. Min-suk pulled him toward the bed. Because you're stuck with us. No more running criminal organizations or making enemies. Just this. Forever. Just this, Min-ju agreed, climbing into bed beside his mate. Forever. The bond hummed with shared contentment as they settled into sleep. Outside, their neighborhood was quiet and safe. Inside, their children slept peacefully. No armed guards, no rival factions, no threats lurking in shadows. Just a family. Ordinary and precious, and earned through sacrifice. Min-ju had spent 15 years as the ghost of Seoul, untouchable, powerful, alone. Now he was just Appa. Just a husband. Just a professor who sometimes told suspiciously realistic crime stories. And for the first time in his life, just was more than enough. It was everything. Yendi,